The following is a paid political broadcast by the United Alliance, committed to providing visionary, competent, and accountable governance of Montserrat's affairs. Today, United Alliance political leader Reuben T Meade speaks with veteran journalist Mike Jarvis on key matters of national importance, including access and inward investment. Over to you, Mike.
Mr. Meade, it's wonderful to speak with you again in person. How are you? How's the campaign going?
Campaign is going well. We're doing the hard work. We're hoping to win this election. And we're hoping to make some transformation to Montserrat as a result of winning the election.
Transformation, that's a key word to start. What type of transformations are you looking at?
Well, if you've looked at what has happened in Montserrat over the past 10 years that I'm not in government, the only things that government has been able to boast about is the port project, which is seemingly coming to a halt before it's completed, and the hospital project, which has started in some form, in little drips and drops. We're hoping that government, before they leave office, will have a signed contract for the hospital to actually commence work, possibly by November. And we will complete that project, but we will ensure that it's properly managed.
Well, these are not necessarily new projects as such. I mean, these things have been in the works ever since you were in government the last time around.
Well, that's the point I'm making. The government seemingly can only see things which the British government permits them to do. If one was to look at Little Bay pre-2009 and Little Bay at 2014, one would have seen substantial developments over that period of time. If one was to look at the housing sector, you'd also see that between 2009 and 2014, that government participated in the construction of pretty much most of the government buildings that have been built and erected. And nothing has been done since. Houses for people have been built using resources other than the British government's resources to get that done. There's still a shortfall in housing, affordable housing, and that's again something which we need to get done, and get done very quickly as well. In terms of private sector development and private sector initiatives, government has not spoken with outside private investors as if they're waiting for the British government to do it. And based on what I heard recently, the governor will lead on any private sector investment initiatives for Montserrat, which clearly is the wrong approach. Private sector development falls within the remit of the Office of the Premier. We had an organization called the MDC, which was closed for whatever reason, and therefore we do not have a vehicle to promote private sector development in Montserrat. And we will create or recreate or resuscitate either an MDC or an MDC-styled operation to facilitate private sector investment and private sector development.
Let us explore this issue of private sector development, of private sector growth, of private sector investment in Montserrat. And one of the first things that comes to mind is this big recurring debate about access. That has to be private sector led in a large respect. So what's your approach to that? I know previously you had mentioned about having a train auto service in place, having a ferry operation in place somehow. How is that materializing?
Well, we're having discussions on the twin auto operations. The meeting I held today, we're not in a position to have a twin auto from that organization before the middle of June next year, which is really unfortunate. Again, because of the unavailability of those planes at short notice. The first one which we can get is possibly a 3-year-old twin otter But again, the line is so long that we have to wait.
I'm sorry, but if you're talking about a 3-year-old Twin Otter, that's practically new compared to trends in the market at the moment.
Yes, it's practically new. But we also have to look at what's available to us on the ground. SVG has Twin Otters. Why are we not using SVG Twin Otters? A Twin Otter, based on recent statements by the outgoing government, is that there's no restriction on the Twin Otter coming into Montserrat. The restriction is on the outgoing. So let's look at some numbers. The Islanders take 6 passengers with luggage. A Twin Otter can come in, based on the discussions they've had, with 16 passengers with full luggage. That's almost 3 times as many, or 2.5 times as many passengers as the Islanders can take. Even if you're going out with 12 passengers on the Twin Otter, that's twice as much as an Islander can take. So we need to look at ensuring that we have Twin Otters operating on the route. It doesn't mean that the Islanders can't continue to operate. But if you're bringing larger numbers on island, you need to have at least 1 Twin Otter, preferably 2 Twin Otters, in the fleet operating the Montserrat route. Now, how do we get that done without breaking the bank? We have to include Dominica Canefield, Nevis, Montserrat, and possibly Barbuda on the schedule, so that you're making money from the Twin Otter being in the air. So if you have low bookings, then you're going to be moving your plane around. However, in the high season, which is basically the middle of November to middle of January, and in March, we will need those Twin Otters operating practically full-time on the Montserrat route. On top of that, because of the numbers, we will need to have a ferry operation. In my discussions this morning in London, I have a commitment that we can land a ferry in Montserrat by the middle of November. We've lost the opportunity to get it any earlier than that, so we're looking now at the middle of November. Will the ferry service be viable? The answer is no. So here's what's happening. It's a ferry that handles both cargo and passengers. We're looking at moving cargo and passengers from Guadeloupe to Montserrat, passengers from Montserrat to St. Kitts or Nevis, to Antigua, and possibly up to St. Martin. Most of our cargo coming into Montserrat comes in via St. Martin. I plan to have a discussion with the Prime Minister of Antigua Barbuda to see whether or not they can facilitate our cargo coming through Antigua. And if the cargo can come through Antigua, then we use the existing vessels plus the ferry to bring that cargo from Antigua to Montserrat. And that will reduce the cost of living in Montserrat. Not significantly, but at least marginally. Access without access makes no sense even talking about hotel development. So we have to ensure that we have maximum access. Secondly, why did we build this airport? This airport was initially built, by the way, not under my administration. It was built using 5 years' worth of ferry subsidy as the valuation for the airport. And once you had the airport built, the ferry would have gone. And that is pretty much what happened until the people of Montserrat made a fuss and the ferry came back. We cannot continue to try and sustain a ferry that we're renting at $15 to $17 million per year. Hence, this is why we're looking at this private sector venture, which will then be in a position to do a sub-regional ferry operation with Montserrat being the base.
Okay, I want to explore that emerging operation with you, and also the matter of the airport that we currently have. But just on the point of the ferry, there's a recurring issue surrounding ferry operations or intentions to operate ferries in Montserrat, and that has to do quite a lot with regulations, and that also applies on the air side with the visa restrictions we have at the airport. Tell us about the regulations regarding the ferry, if the ferry that you're looking at to operate between Montserrat and other islands, if that there's a guarantee that it will meet all of the required regulations.
The regulation, the critical regulation for ferry operating in Montserrat is the SOLAS, meeting the SOLAS requirements. In all of my discussions with the investor group I'm dealing with, first question I ask when they're looking at a ferry, is it SOLAS certified? Because don't talk to me unless you have a SOLAS certified vessel. And yes, that is part of what has been guaranteed. It's SOLAS certified. The crew will also be certified to the SOLAS levels. So that's taken care of. So that's not a concern anymore. They will go through the usual regulatory requirements. I've sent them the documentation which I got from the Access Division so that they know what is required, and they're following that to the T. As it relates to the RESA, we need possibly to extend the airstrip by 200 feet. That I think can be achieved at minimal cost. Using gabion baskets, I'm no engineer, but I've tinkered with construction.
Okay, tell us what a gabion basket is, please.
Okay, the gabion baskets are wire baskets filled with stones, and those have been used throughout the Caribbean, throughout Montserrat as well, to hold up soil and materials. So it will either be a gabion basket type system, or it could be done with concrete.
So ideally these will be stacked on one another to a certain height for the extension of the runway.
Yeah, stacked to come up to a particular level to accept fill. We have sufficient fill because there are rocks in Corkhill coming from the sand miners that they have no use for. So we can just get them to bring the rocks in, put lighting systems in place so they can work at night so they do not disrupt the airport operations. Once you get it up to the height of the runway, or just below the height of the runway, you then fill the rest of that with sand. And the RESA, according to the quote-unquote experts, is an area where if the plane fails, if the engine fails, that the wheels will not continue to move. So once you run into that sandy area, it restricts the movement of the plane and brings it to a stop. And that could be done for a few $100,000. Sand miners will get some work. Other people will get work to fill the gabion baskets. And that's something that I've been assured could be completed in 3 months.
Given that in all of these conversations, it always comes back to the point of Montserrat being in British aid. Is this something that you're looking at private sector involvement to do, or will this be part of the aid request to the British government?
No, I'm not seeing that as an aid request. In terms of the philanthropic organization I'm dealing with here in London, they are willing to fund that extension on our behalf. As they're saying, it's not a hell of a lot of money, we will pay for it.
Does it obviously would have to go through regulatory approval, etc., but is this something that a government of Montserrat can undertake without the British government giving approval to add this extension to the airport?
That has absolutely nothing to do with the British government. The local government must govern. That's the role of the government. It's an infrastructure project. If the British are not paying for it, we will find philanthropic organizations who are willing to put the money there to assist us. And it's it's a matter of shopping around and finding the right organizations. And I think over the past 6 months thereabouts, that we found a grouping based partially in the in the UK, partially in the US, and partially in Europe, who have deep pockets and are willing to help us. But help, yes, we'll accept the help, but it is something that first and foremost we need to talk with the engineers to ensure that what we're talking about can be done. And once the engineers have agreed and designed it, we will go ahead and get it done. We don't need the authority of the governor or the British government to do it. That's a local government responsibility.
Well, here you are in London, we're speaking, and you've been having these discussions, exploring all of these investment, etc. possibilities. And you're sort of operating like a one-man business exploration and investment agency. Isn't that what Montserrat needs more of? An organization, other islands have it, other countries have it, and I'm going back to, and you'd spoken about, an MDC type operation where we reach out to the regional, local, global business community for investment, because I'm going to say it, Montserrat cannot continue to rely on British aid forever.
See, we have governments that have become aid addicts. All they can think of, we need to get something done, the British government has to do it. The British government has to do this, the British government has to do that. My philosophy and approach over the years has always been, whatever the British government cannot help you with, you go out and find investors to assist you in getting it done. That is the role of government. The other one is being able to use your contacts for the benefit of the people of Montserrat. And that's simply what I've been doing. Now, people wondering, okay, why is he coming to London to have these discussions? Is he running away in the heat of an election campaign? No, it is simply saying the business has to continue. And once we get into office, on the 25th of October, we will start getting these investors on the ground and in place to make sure that we can move Montserrat forward. It's critically important. We have to say to persons who want to come to Montserrat for Christmas, yo, there will be a ferry. There will be airlift. And here's how you do your booking in order to get onto the ferry and onto the aircrafts. But we have to provide them with the guarantee that, in fact, no, you don't need to overnight in Antigua. You will get to Montserrat.
To get to that, though, doesn't it also require what I've been calling a Montserrat, a reset, a shifting of whatever mindset that seems to have taken root? And you're getting these suggestions that it's difficult to do business, it's difficult to get business started. How do we get beyond that to what you are envisioning and working on at the moment?
You see, part of what happens is that if the leader is not in a position to lead, then the rest of the organization falls apart. And we see that happening within government. We must be able to make it easier to do business in Montserrat. So the MDC or MDC-style organization, it must come back into being. Must. It's an absolute must. We must be in a position to get our farmers to produce and know that they have a market, a consistent market. So one of the things you're looking at is a chicken farmer who is doing broilers should simply concentrate on doing broilers and don't have to think about how they're going to sell the broilers or how they're going to slaughter the broilers. So one of the systems you put in place is, look, let's create for want of a better word, a broiler slaughterhouse. We will pick up the broilers from your farm, do the weights, take them and slaughter them, store them and sell them. You collect your check and you get your next batch and continue. We can do that by contract farming. The same thing with egg and egg production. We must be doing pigs, swine production, and we must, absolute must, deal with goats. We need to have more goat meat available in Montserrat. This is your national dish. Goat what is your national dish? And my understanding is that goat meat is now costing $15 a pound. That's ridiculous. So let us get some goat farmers and get them set up properly. Let's get some hydroponics and aquaponic operations in place. Get those going. And let's also get the micro enterprise up and running. And in this way, you start a reset of your economy. You start creating movement in your economy. And then, of course, within the next year or so, you now look at ensuring that a hotel is being developed. And one of the questions was asked today is the Viewpoint Hotel for sale? And the answer is yes, it is for sale. So I'll provide the contact of one of the children to the investor group here. They will get in touch with them, and then they can make a move from there. But that is one of the possibilities. The other possibility, of course, is Little Bay and the Little Bay developments. And we're also targeting other investor groups from Northern Caribbean and elsewhere who may have an interest. There's also a Montserratian in the UK with deep pockets whose grandfathers indicated to him, you have to make an investment in Montserrat. And that's a deathbed promise he made. And we're going to have a continued discussion with him. The other element is, let us create a trust fund where persons can invest in this trust fund or mutual fund, where, Mike, you may put in £2,000, somebody else puts in, and so forth and so forth. And you get an interest on it. But then you use that money for Montserratians to start building out Montserrat. Get involved in the building of hotels, or of the hotel. Get involved in building of the villas in Little Bay. So that it's not all foreign direct investment, but it's also local investment as well. And these are some of the things which we have to get going, and get going urgently. But those have to be tailored through a MDC or MDC-styled organization.
Well, I'm no economist. You are the economist. But what you mentioned there about the sort of mutual fund style opportunity to make a personal investment that would go towards the economic development in Montserrat. I do recall a few years back posting something along that line based on a model that I'd seen in another Caribbean island. And I am going to post it along with this. I said, I am no economist, you are the economist. The way that you are envisioning what Montserrat can return to being, there's one key element, and that is population. Population growth, population retention, but also getting the overseas Montserrat population more involved in the economic revitalization of Montserrat. Tell us about that.
Using the trust fund is one such vehicle. But there's also another question, and I'll ask a question. If you were to come back to Montserrat, do you have some place that you can call your own?
For a lot of us from the southern two-thirds of Montserrat who are overseas, the answer is no.
Okay. So one of the things we're looking at is, let us start some housing units, which would be called affordable units, not the affordable units that the British government has paid tens of thousands of dollars to design, which costs $500,000 to build. Makes no sense. We're talking about affordable units designed by locals, mass-produced, have in place a batching plant, and get houses built. Government has lands which could be used. A chap, Maverick Fenton in the US, had designed some just below Radio Montserrat, but that did not come to fruition because of elections and so forth. Royally has lands which are available. We can look at over there as well. And there are others who have said, We have lands, but we don't have access. So can government help us to cut the road and put in the infrastructure? And I'm saying, certainly. We'll find a way of getting that done. It means that somebody in the UK wishing to come back to Montserrat can in fact come back and say, okay, I don't want to be here full time, so can I lease one of these properties at an affordable rate? And that will be a possibility. The other element is healthcare, because quite a number of persons up here saying, if your healthcare is not acceptable, then we're not coming. What we're saying, don't look at the hospital building. Look at the services that are being offered in the hospital. What services we cannot offer, as in specialist services, yes, we'll try to do that incorporated within the new hospital. Visiting medical specialists, Dr. Daly has already said, Reuben, if you win the election, I'm willing to come back and work with you as a visiting medical specialist and coordinating it. There are others who have said, we're willing to come. So you'll have specialists coming in maybe every 3 months or every month, depending on the numbers which we can attract. But we also need to have an MOU revised, because we had one already, but it was shelved under the administration that took over in 2014. Guadeloupe has European Union standard medical facilities. Let us revive that MOU, because all you need now is a helicopter taking an emergency case from the airport in Montserrat directly to the hospital in Guadeloupe. And as Guadeloupe says, if it's a case that we can't handle, within that MOU, we move them on to Martinique that has other specialist skills. And these are things which we can assure one and all that the MOU was there. Colin Riley, as the Minister for Health, was with me when we went and did that MOU. We just need to find it, brush it off, go back and have a chat with them and resuscitate it. In that way, you're providing affordable housing not only for people who are resident in Montserrat, but also for persons who are willing to come back home and make those houses available to them.
Mr. Meade, thank you very much for taking the time. Just before we close, the outlook that you've detailed for us there, or at least given us an insight into that, I just want to come back to the more immediate, and, well, everything is a pressing concern right now, but those that are more immediate, the access-related issues regarding the discussions that you've been having in the UK. Just remind us where we are now with those.
The ferry that we're discussing should be available in Montserrat by mid-November. We're targeting 15th of November for that. The aircraft operations, we're working with a local group along with SVG, because SVG already has the Twin Otter, to see whether or not we can get them to reposition the Twin Otter to Montserrat. Once we get that up and going, then we should be able to move forward for the Christmas season. Post the Christmas season, then the Twin Otter and the 3-year-old Twin Otter that I said, we can get that on a wet lease. That could be in place by June of next year, kind of late for St. Patrick's and late for Christmas, but at least it will be available, operated, and we'll figure out how it will be operated. Definitely will not be government operated. And then we continue to build on that, so that you're bringing new aircraft online, you're bringing a new ferry online, new as in newly built ferry online, which will meet the needs of the people of Montserrat. Because if you're going into tourism development and you can't get people on island, what's the point? I'll give you one example. A friend of mine left Miami on a Thursday to come and spend a weekend with his mother in Montserrat. He called me on Monday morning to say, yo, I'm in Montserrat. So I said, okay, I'll pass and check you. When are you leaving? He says, I'm leaving this afternoon. So when did you get here? Sunday. He spent Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and half of Sunday in Antigua because he could not get any flights into Montserrat. So when is your flight back to Florida? Tuesday. So why are you leaving Monday? Because I am not getting a flight out on Tuesday, so therefore I have to leave Monday so I can get my connecting flight on Tuesday. We cannot build confidence, one, for our diaspora, or our Montserratians living overseas, definitely cannot work. And if we're going into tourism development, a tourist is not going to come and stay in Antigua for 2 days waiting for a connection. So we have to be in a position to guarantee them that connection to Montserrat. The issue with the RISA, we will have it corrected by January, February, which then have unrestricted access for the Twin Otter, which means the Twin Otter would then be able to come in with a full payload and leave with a full payload. And these are commitments which we already have in terms of we will be able to provide the financing. We don't have to go to DFID or whatever institution they're called to get financing. This organization is willing to pay for that.
Mr. Meade, thank you very much for your time.
You're most welcome.
Thanks, Mike, and thank you for listening to today's interview with United Alliance political leader Reuben T Meade. This was a paid political broadcast by the United Alliance, committed to providing visionary, competent, and accountable governance of